I used to define myself as a director. I realise in my head that's what I was. And then more recently I've realised that just a bloke who goes out and walks his dog and occasionally goes and does bits of television or filming. And it's important, it's a small statement, but it's a very important difference that I'm not, it's what you define yourself as. And I think it's dangerous to define yourself as what your career is and not be just yourself.
Hello and welcome to Where Creatives Connect. My name is Jamie Sharp and this is the podcast that brings you the behind the scenes of creatives from all walks of life, whether they be directors, actors, musicians, poets, dancers, you name it. I'll have them on here and I'll do my very best as a brand new interviewer to dig out the golden goodies behind the scenes of their processes, their lives and their journeys. Today, I am very excited. I'm a little nervous, but I'm very excited and I'm very grateful, very nervous, very excited to have on David Innes-Edwards. You don't know it yet, but he has shaped and directed more TV than you know over the last 3 or 4 decades, including Casualty, Holby City, New Tricks, The Dumping Ground, At Home with the Braithwaites, The Bill, Heartbeat, Pie in the Sky, Playing the Field, Liverpool One, Born and Bred, Brookside, EastEnders, Waterloo Road, to name but a few. Okay. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you.
For the people that don't know you, apart from my introduction there, this question is for them. If you, say you're on the train to Cardiff this weekend and somebody was chatting away to you about what you do for a living, what's your go-to?
Well, I generally don't offer up what I do because it can lead to hours of conversation, or I don't like to sound a bit show-offy sometimes, I work in television, it's kind of... So I don't really offer it up, but if people ask, then I'm quite happy to tell them what I do, and reactions vary a lot. I think really most people don't have much of a clue what a director does for a start, but they think they do. So
Do you find if you drop the name of what you're working on, say it's Holby City or Casualty, if they are a keen watcher, do they have quite a vivid reaction about, say, the storyline, or do they come at you a little bit?
Yeah, often they do. And what I find quite a lot is it's kind of a lot of people's guilty pleasure. So the first thing they tend to say is, I don't watch that. I don't watch that. And then give you the last 10 years storyline in great detail. So clearly they do watch it.
Yeah, interesting. Take me back. 10-year-old David, growing up, whether it be primary school or high school, were there any creative opportunities that you felt shaped you into the road you've walked?
Since I knew I was coming to chat to you, I've thought about the process and what I do, and it's quite hard because you don't really generally analyse what you do as you go along, and actually being forced to think about it in a way is quite a good thing because you start to analyse your process,
Yeah.
But also that part of the history, what made me go into it in the first place. And I did have a primary school teacher called Mrs. Back who encouraged us in drama and, put on school plays. And I absolutely loved it, That was at the age of 10, And then into secondary school, I always was involved in the school plays and did lots of acting.
So you were a performer as a youth?
Initially, So, and then at college, I did a humanities course, which was drama and English, but all the English modules I chose were all drama related as well. So I did an awful lot of acting there and did consider it as a career briefly, and then decided that I wasn't really good enough as an actor and that, I didn't want to end up as a kind of out of work, struggling actor. I wanted to, really make a career or something. And I thought at that stage that stage management in theatre would be the way to go. So I didn't know anybody in television. I had no idea how to kind of enter the world, but I did theatre. So
that was going to be my next question. Was there anybody you were able to access through television or watching local theatre that you could see, that's somebody that I might want to aspire to be like as you were growing up?
Yeah, not really. I mean, there was a lecturer at college called Bill who had been a stage manager, and just the tales he told about working on shows, as stage managing, and music videos and all sorts that he'd done before he'd become a college lecturer, and I was just spellbound by that. I thought, that's it, that's what I want to do. So the last thing I did at college was at Edinburgh Festival. We took a piece up to the Edinburgh Festival as a part of the college, and I got to know another theatre group that were in the same building as us. We were sharing up in Edinburgh, and they kept coming saying, "Oh, we need this prop making, and we need a bit of scenery fixing, and Dave, could you help us out?" Which I did, and the show won a Fringe first, and then transferred to the West End, and they said, "Oh, would you come and help us out there too?" So
wow,
I did. It was at the Arts Theatre, and I ended up helping to build a set, do all the get-in, and then they said, "Ooh," it was all a bit shambolic, and they said, we haven't got a DSM. Would you like to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, fine."
Yeah, I'll take that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So there I was, doing all the lighting and sound cues and so on in the wings of the Arts Theatre.
So dropped into the deep end quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely, straight into the deep end. I'd never done it before.
And you would have been 17, 18?
By then I was kind of 20, 21, I think, something like that. So that gave me my kind of first professional experience. Well, hardly professional. I wasn't really paid, but, it was West End. It was, a decent show as well. So, and then a friend of my mother's got the BBC internal newspaper called The Ariel, and in it was an advert for a job called assistant floor manager, which I read the description. I thought, I could do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I phoned. There was a telephone number at the bottom, and I phoned it. And little did I know that job was actually, way above what I was capable of. It was, 2 or 3 years of experience in television and so on. But the manager called me in for an interview, and then said, "Right, well, we're not going to offer you that job, but we'll give you 3 months contract as a runner."
Ah, okay.
And
so
I
they gave
off.
You a leg in.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And I thought, well, that's it. It's television. I didn't know anybody, as I say, and this all had come about through a friend of my mother's who was the construction buyer at Pinewood Studios, and she lived opposite. So there's always somebody,
Somebody. There's a network.
Somebody who knows, and they're just,
And so she encouraged you to go for it, or did she... was she the person who gave you the job advert?
No. Oh, the advert, yeah, just the advert, and then I did the rest myself. So
wow.
I was living in a little bedsit in Muswell Hill at the time, and I phoned the BBC from a phone box in Muswell Hill. Which
wow!
I always, whenever I go past now, I look at that phone box and I think, wow,
that's where it all started.
It all started.
There's a short in that for sure.
Yeah. And the Marcia Wheeler was the manager of drama series and serials at the time, and she said that she was looking for a runner and didn't have anybody and couldn't find anybody that was suitable. And the phone rang, and it was me from this phone box in Muswell Hill. So she said she felt there was something in it, which was why she got me in.
That's brilliant. And was that to work on one specific show, or was that to work across all?
No, well, in the end it was, but that was just a 3-month contract to start with on a series called Give Us a Break. It was about a young snooker player with Robert Lindsay and Paul McGann.
Okay.
And as a runner, your tasks really are to look after the artists, make sure that they arrive on set in a good mood at the right time, ready to go,
I suppose a lot relies on you to make sure the inner workings are all happy and comfortable.
Yeah.
in between
Yeah.
shoots.
And it was all location, all in West London, all in kind of snooker halls and so on, and various locations all around West London. So I had to, logistically, you had to make sure you knew where you were going, and it was, before the days of sat-navs and things, so it all had to be studied and worked out. And Paul McGann was a bit of a nightmare in terms of getting him even out of bed in the morning. So,
And that was your responsibility?
yeah, so the BBC gave me a car that I could drive from Muswell Hill down to where he lived in Kentish Town and throw stones at his window and get him up.
Wow.
And then deliver him to the location, where I'd make sure he went through costume and makeup and had his breakfast and was happy.
Really looking after him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then deliver him to the set. And the other artists as well. But, I mean, Paul was one of the leads, and Robert Lindsay was very, organised and well. He was much easier, really, to deal with. And, I was thinking about that. Paul McGann, then, that was prior to Withnail and I. So he was, a young kind of upcoming actor, but he hadn't done Withnail, so he wasn't, the legend that he became. But I didn't work with him again until about 3 years ago, and he had a regular part in Holby City for a season where he played Gaskell, who was a kind of evil doctor that was experimenting on people. And when I met him again after 40 years, I thought he won't remember. So I said hello to him, bumped into him in a corridor. I said hello, and I said, I don't know if you remember Paul, all those years ago. Mm. He said, hang on a minute, and he disappeared. Right? And he said, I'll be back. Oh. And a couple of minutes later, he came back with a book of Yeats poems, right? And he opened the front and he said, look, there's your handwriting.
No way.
Yeah. And
wow.
he kept that book. That was obviously his kind of muse,
Yes, yeah.
He used to dip in and read a bit of Yeats just to
get in the zone.
Get in the zone.
Wow.
And I'd written a note to him in the front of it, and he kept it all those years, and he remembered that it was me and my hand.
And he had it on him.
He had it
whilst
then,
working.
all those years later, still. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It's lovely, isn't it?
That is so lovely.
Yeah,
and you hadn't worked at all in
Not
between?
seen him or anything for all those years in between. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you find that across your career you have similar experiences where you've worked with somebody for a long stint of time, then you don't see them for a number of years, but then you're able to reconnect further down the line?
Yeah, that often happens, and quite a lot of actors that you build a kind of company of your own, of trusted people that you love working with, and so you kind of recast and others that perhaps go on to such big stuff that you'll never get them again, for the kind of scale of stuff I'm doing,
Yeah.
I did series 2 of Waterloo Road, and I cast young Jack O'Connor in that. He was only 15, and it was really good. I mean, he was raw, and I thought, this boy's good, I'm going to cast him. And he did a really good episode. And then, of course, he went on to massive stuff, in Hollywood and so on.
So has part of your role within directing also been on the casting front as well, and spotting new talent? And
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's part of the process that you always do, when you sit down and start a job. The preparation period is as vital as the shoot period, really, and part of that is casting. So you'll always be working with a casting director who will bring in people and you interview them, And of course, it's all been done on Zoom in the last few years, but it was always face-to-face before that. And I think it will return to that, I hope, but I'm not sure, really, whether, it does save an awful lot of travel and time for people. So,
of course.
But there's nothing quite like meeting
in person.
Face to face. It just, your instinct, whether somebody is going to be good on camera, you do, in the end, a mixture of experience and instinct. You can choose people that, and then bam, on camera, off they go.
Yeah.
So,
and I suppose there would be an argument that if you're seeing them on Zoom, they are on camera, but that's not all you have to do. You have to work with the actual human, the person, and make sure that that's all.
See, part of that is if they're doing a self-tape, then and they've been asked to play a character, then clearly that's what they're going to give you. But when you meet somebody in a room, you can see what they're like as a person, and then you'll see their performance, and that's a big clue as to their kind of versatility. You know, that they may be playing a character and able just to slip into a character that they've invented, which you don't get to see if you just see the presentation that they give. You know, so I much prefer a face-to-face. Again, you can get somebody who delivers a fantastic audition, and then that's exactly what you get on camera, but no different to that, you know. Whereas the best actors are much more versatile, so, you know, they'll give you a good base performance, but then you can go in and tweak, and you can give notes, and you can just enhance it, you know, until you get something electrifying, you know. So,
when you were as a runner and doing various jobs, was it around 7 years you were at the BBC before you embarked on the directing?
It was actually about 9 in the end. I started directing at the end of 91, I think. So yeah, it was about 9 years. But it was different then because I got a staff job at the BBC. There was a structure that I could work through, and I got trained in each step before I was allowed to actually go on and do it. Which doesn't exist now. People don't do training, you know, you just have to go out, try and get experience, and then hope that somebody gives you a break into the next stage on the production process, you know, the next job. Why
do you think that has dismantled? Why do you think there isn't a through line or a route through?
It's probably down to costs in the end, you know. The BBC was willing to spend money on training, and you know, I learned from some amazing people in production, you know, who'd floor managed live drama and things like that, you know. And there's nothing quite as kind of terrifying as hearing 30 seconds to transmission in your ear, you know.
But your heart is pounding.
Yeah, you know, it's going out live. And they, you know, the BBC often used to do live drama, and they've experimented with it over the last few years, you know, they did a live episode of The Bill, which I didn't direct, but I was there at The Bill at the time. And logistically, it was huge, you can imagine, you know, how many cameras and sound recordists and, you know.
Yeah.
They were very ambitious with it. It was good, and it worked very well. Except they had to do a stunt with a car where they were trying to tip it on its roof and then play the next few scenes with the 2 actors trapped in the car upside down. And the stuntman didn't quite make the role, and the car ended up back on its wheels. So,
oh no!
And this is going out live. You can't, you know.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Quick, change the storyline. He's fine. He's fine.
Yeah. And that shows you why people don't do live drama really anymore. You know.
Yeah. Was the idea of doing another live drama on the bill there just an experiment, or is it?
Yeah, it was just a one-off. They only did it once. I mean, it was too big a kind of project to do on a regular basis, but somebody decided it would be a good thing to do, you know. So
fair play to them.
Yeah. But those production jobs that I did, I thoroughly enjoyed the time, you know, of working in you know, shows like Lovejoy and Spender, and you know, all over the country, and some bits abroad, not very much, but I did a week in Venice on Lovejoy. So I thoroughly enjoyed it, but what it did was allowed me to observe other directors at work, you know. To the first director I worked with on that show, Give Us a Break, that I mentioned.
Yes.
It was called David Reynolds, and he was really, I didn't know anything about television or the fact that there were even directors in television, that stuff was shot on film, all on location. You know, you don't think of television like that. Really.
Of course. You just see the end product and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, so there I was kind of thrown into all this, but as a runner, able to stand back and observe how people worked, you know. So I saw David Reynolds and I thought, that's the job for me. You know?
So
that's the
was it key figures like him that set your eyes on that's where you want to end up?
That's it. I was, 23. He must have been 35 at the time, but he smoked a pipe. And
a real character.
Cool and laid back, yeah. And the actors loved him, He didn't give many notes, but he did give very specific, really good little notes for performances. And the actors absolutely adored him. And we used to go to Lime Grove when that was still a studio. And when the episodes had all been edited together, they used to do a crew showing, So we'd sit there and view his episode through and then go and have a drink. And, it was great. And some of the other directors that came on to that series, they just didn't have what David had as a director. It was one, I won't say his name, but he followed a kind of religious cult back one. I can't remember what it was called, but he dressed all in orange. Right? He had a big beard and beads with a picture of this Bhagwan around his neck.
Wow!
And,
I need to see this chap.
I know. So he was
I'll
another.
put him up here on the camera.
He was another director who did, a couple of episodes in that series, but he was a strange man, and he used to meditate on set and things, and get down on his knees in the middle of a snooker hall and start.
Oh wow! Bringing the attention right to him.
Yeah, you could see the actors looking at him like, "Who is this guy?" and then so we'd go for viewings of his episodes, and they were as dull as anything.
Interesting.
By comparison to David.
Are you able to, when you watch any TV series, are you able to know or notice when it changes from director to director?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah,
I can. I think most people probably won't, but they'll know something's different.
Yeah.
It's a really hard thing to quantify, really, why some directors just get the best out of people and others get what is expected. What tends to happen, and most people obviously, unless they've experienced it, won't know this, is that a whole unit will take on the character of the director. So you're very much front and centre, as a director, you're right up there. And the unit will take on like a bigger version of the character of the director. It's hard to explain, but I've seen it so many times over the years. And so if you've got kind of character faults, they will show,
Oh, interesting. So you're setting the energy and the workflow.
Very much.
Oh, I'm with you.
Yeah. The first series of Lovejoy, my job then, I'd moved up from being a runner to being an assistant floor manager. And so I was dealing with all the props, all the action props, which was brilliant. On Lovejoy, you can imagine, it was all dealing with antiques and things, But there's a director who's had a massive influence on me in my career called Baz Taylor. Brilliant man, and one of the funniest people I've ever worked with. And he had us all in stitches all the way through the shoot. But what he did was, the kind of charm that he has as a man was infused into the programme, And again, other directors who did other episodes of Lovejoy, I notice it, most people don't, because they'll be watching Ian McShane and Dudley Sutton and, or Phyllis Logan and, enjoying their performances. But I can see the difference, and I know why one episode is just a delight to watch and another one is okay, but it just doesn't have that charm. See what I mean? It's down to that.
Totally. And whose job is it then to pick and choose the directors? Is it a producer?
Yeah, producer or executives now. The whole kind of chain of command has changed over the time I've been doing it. Producers were used to be hired and get on with it, put the melting pot together, but now there's executive producers. If you look at credits for TV shows now, there's often 4 or 5 screens worth of executive producers now.
And are they likely to be directors themselves or past directors?
Possibly, but often not. No, often not. There is that kind of saying in the industry that everybody wants to be a director or thinks they can be.
Talk me through your directing process. So from the moment you get a call or an email to say you're wanted on set,
yeah,
I imagine there's a amble of getting the script to you, understanding who you're working with, then you've got the shoot itself, and then post as well.
Yeah.
Are you involved across all of that?
Yeah, the whole thing. So when you start, either you get your script beforehand or you'll get it when you start, and you carefully read through. I always find the first read is really important for any script, because it gives you the general feel, not the detail. You just take in
the essence of what it is,
and the emotions of what the writer's after. And so you'll sit and you'll kind of make notes, and they'll often go through several drafts before, tweaking with producers and script editors and so on, until everybody's happy, or you run out of time.
Yeah. Do you have much dialogue with the writers during their?
Sometimes, depends. Some writers are kept away deliberately, and others, it's you can just phone them up and say, "What do you mean by this? Would it be better if we did this instead?" And they'll say, "No, I'm not changing it." Or you can. It varies. Some writers over the years I've had really good close working relationships with. So there's that process. There's the casting. So you're doing casting sessions, either face to face or through Zoom, getting your cast together for your guest actors. If like on Holby or Casualty, there's a strong core of kind of regular actors, and then you're casting your guests for your episodes. On other stuff that I've done, you're starting from scratch. You're having to cast the whole thing. So that's a really vital part of the process. And then you're going out and looking for locations. It's very time consuming.
Absolutely. I imagine that can take days and weeks of time.
It can. And location finds is a bit like buying a house. You go and look for 5 minutes and you think, yeah, this is great, this will do us. But you've no idea what
the implications. Yeah. What's the local Tesco like? Who knows?
You find, there was one I went to in central London. It was a club that a friend of mine had a close pal who ran it, and he said, "Oh yeah, they're happy to, for you to come and recce and perhaps use it as a location." And we went on an evening, and it was open, and there were people, there was music playing, and it was great. It was a really good location. And I said, "Yeah, fine, I'd love to shoot here," and we arranged it all and everything. It wasn't till we turned up on the camera recce, which you always go to before you start shooting. That we found out there was a tube line right outside the main window.
Oh no!
Yeah,
so did you have to shoot in between the trains?
Yeah.
Oh,
and it was too late to change by then.
Sound-wise, that is just
what
a nightmare.
You can imagine.
The frequency of trains as well is just a rumble. Gosh. Yeah. Oh, that sends chills down my spine.
Yeah. So you've got to be careful. When you're doing that. And anyway, so that then hopefully you've got all your locations, you've got all your cast, your script is as good as it's ever going to be, and as a director, your prep varies an awful lot, depending on the show really. And when I first started, I used to prep everything. Things like Brookside, they actually required a shot list that you had to print out and give to everybody, so that all the crew, so that they all knew exactly what setups you were going to do. And not many shows asked for that really, but I did. It was my first. Brookside was my first freelance job as a director, and I did a year and a half in the end there. And by the end of that, it was I always think of it as my kind of apprenticeship really, because it built my confidence to a point where, say I'd been walking down the road and a runner came out and said, "Our director's just collapsed, can you come and take over?" I could step in, read a scene and say, "Right, this is what we're going to do."
Yeah. You had the fluency then from working for a year and a half. As a freelance director, do you get a contract that says we need you for a year and a half, or do we need you for this many episodes, or do they see if they like you after a couple of episodes?
They do. I mean, the Brookside was 6 monthly, so they renewed it a couple of times, which is why I stayed there so long. And it was partly because at the BBC, people were always known for what they did and not what they do now.
Interesting.
I had been a first assistant, production manager at the BBC, and I thought I need to get away from there so that I can come back as a director. There was a designer, fully fledged designer at the BBC, whose nickname was the Painter, because he'd been a scenic artist when he started.
And that's what he was remembered as.
Always known
No way.
forever more as the painter. So, you know, it
sticks.
was a peculiar thing, yeah, it was. Anyway, I managed a year and a half and then came back to the BBC and did some work as a director on Casualty, which, you know, got me a step up out of the kind of half-hour format of continuing drama and into 50-minuters, and that's quite a big, important step, really, in terms of a career. A big influence on me in my early days as a director was a show called Edge of Darkness, the original Edge of Darkness with Bob Peck in it. And it was shown, I think it was probably 1984 or 5, something like that. And it just blew me away when I first saw it. It was incredible. Martin Campbell directed it, who went on to do Bonds and all sorts of things. But this was his kind of one of his final telly pieces. And it was all shot on a long lens. This is partly what I wanted to talk about today, really, is your kind of technical knowledge, you know, that you need to build up as you go as a director. Because you need to have, I think, a balance between technical knowledge and an artistic interpretation of stuff, you know, and the two should be balanced. Because you quite often hear people, directors described as an actor's director. In other words, they are brilliant with the cast, but will leave the crew to do all the shooting. You know,
so they're a people's person, but they'll leave the technicalities away. I'm with you.
Or they're a technical director, and they just leave the actors to get on with it. In my mind, you should be able to do both well, because it's pointless getting the best performance in the world if you're not getting the right shot to capture it. And do you see what's happening?
Totally. And would you say that your jobs leading up to directing gave you a good grounding in what's required from the different roles, so that you can be an actor's director, a people's person, and a technical person all in one?
All those jobs in production that I went through, you know, as a location manager, as an assistant floor manager, first assistant and so on, they just allowed me to observe other directors working and kind of cherry pick, you know, what works and what I think didn't work.
Yeah.
You know, and you build up your experience and your approach then from that. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
You know,
I imagine you can also either make or break your crew. If you know how their jobs work, you can make sure that there's enough time for everybody to get their jobs done, or enough space, or if they need to be left alone, you're able to cater that and carve that out, or the opposite.
Yeah. Well, what I was saying about you know, directors' personalities infusing the crew, I've seen directors over the years who are kind of control freaks, you know, and so they won't do anything unless it was their idea. Quite a lot of big, well-known directors work in that way, and they're kind of famous for being brilliant, and you know, but they won't take a suggestion from anybody else, even if it's brilliant, you know. What I observed was that the directors who allowed suggestions to come from, you know, you've got 50 people, experienced people around you, and they will, if allowed to, they'll throw in some fantastic ideas. Seems ridiculous to me not to
use
use those ideas, and you know, and if you can create the right atmosphere where you can say it's a great idea, but I don't think it's appropriate for this situation we're in, they won't take offence, and they'll pipe up something else the next day or later that day or whatever, you know. If there's that atmosphere, and that's what I observed with that director Baz Taylor on Lovejoy. You know, when I was doing the props, and other directors I'd worked with wanted fine detail about, you know, and I want this, and I want it to be that colour, and I want it to be, and I went to Baz with this list of requirements for props, and he said, "Oh, you decide, and then show me." And I thought, wow,
he's giving you the free rein.
He's giving me ownership of that. Yeah. And so I felt really much more part of the creative process by him being like that. And it wasn't him being lazy. It wasn't because he didn't know what he wanted. He wanted me to bring my contribution to it, and he treated every member of the crew like that. And because of that, everybody felt so much more involved with it and delivered their best work. I think Whereas the control freaks, people tend to just clam up, because they know that their suggestion's not going to be taken, so that they won't offer it up in the first place. And I think as a director, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face,
Absolutely. You worded it perfectly, that there are so many experienced people in the room. Why wouldn't you find a way of coaxing out the good elements of them? And that's a massive skill in itself, just being able to communicate that to people.
Yeah.
As a director, I imagine, particularly on the shows you've been on, there are a number of different scenarios like car crashes, murders, love, giving birth, the real extremes of life.
Yeah.
How have you dealt with, say, a murder in the past, or directing a murder, if you've not experienced one firsthand?
Well, you're a storyteller first and foremost, so you don't have to have experienced everything in order to tell that story.
True.
I don't think. And I have done murders. I did a couple of episodes of a series called Murder in Mind, which was,
Lots
all
of
about
murders.
murder. That was the point of it, really. But I remember having a dream that I'd murdered somebody once.
Oh gosh,
Very disturbing.
should we talk about it on the podcast?
I told my wife, and I said, I've had this dream, where I'd murdered somebody, and I went through all the feelings of guilt and panic, and in the dream, woke up in
a real panic.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think it coincided with working on a show like Murder in Mind, but I said it must go in. It does have an effect on you, so you do live these things. And I've got 2 children, and so I've kind of lived through births and marriages and a lot of real life experiences, so I can kind of advise people on how I think it should go, depending on what the script requirements are, really. But and the extremes of life, as I say, you are just a storyteller. I had a funny experience on a series called Maisie Rain, Pauline Quirk as a detective, and we had the scene I was about to shoot in a couple of days was a full black funeral with a horse-drawn hearse and a procession behind it. I used to stay with a pal of mine in his house in central London, in a kind of room at the top, which I really enjoyed. You were up in the
gods,
like Mary Poppins, And I was lying there one night, and I thought, what music is going to be right for this procession? And I suddenly heard in my head Amazing Grace played on a single harmonica. And I thought, yeah, that would be atmospheric, that would be really good. But I didn't know whether it was appropriate, whether it was a cliche or whether it would be bad taste or whatever. So I thought, right, well, the following day we had a 3-piece black jazz band with us. I thought, I'll ask one of them, they'll know whether it's appropriate, which I did the following day. And they said, oh, you want to ask our lad who's helping us out? I took him aside and I said, he was about 19, this young lad. And I said what the idea was, and he looked at me with such emotion in his eyes, and I thought, blimey, what have I hit on here?
Yeah.
He said, not only is it appropriate, but I was supposed to play my harmonica, Amazing Grace, for my mother at her funeral last week, and I forgot to take my harmonica.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I said, well, look, will you do it? Will you be in the scene, be in part of the procession,
and
play it? And he said, I can play it for my mother. He was so overwhelmed, with it. And I thought, where's that come from?
Yeah, where have you pulled that from? Wow.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Gosh.
experiences, you don't, as I say, you don't have to live them all. Some of them, it's your imagination. Some of it,
you're tapping
into. There's something about that experience that I thought I don't begin to understand
where on earth that's come
But
from.
I'm just glad it did.
Yeah, what a beautiful moment.
Yeah, it was
wow.
lovely.
You mentioned he was 19, and you've worked with all age groups, including young people on The Dumping Ground.
Yeah.
Do you find your directing style has to change dramatically when you're working with young people, or is it that they're...
No,
No?
I really don't. No, it's just a difference of age, really. The process is the same as working with adults and good actors. They obviously they're less experienced, so their skills are more varied. Some are hopeless, and others are brilliant. So really, as a director, your task is to try and balance them up and make them all appear nice and natural. I mean, The Dumping Ground in particular, because it's set in a children's home, and all the characters are from very diverse backgrounds. I suppose the temptation is to as a director, to go in and become mates, with them and try and... But I didn't want to do that, because I just wanted the process to be what I normally do, and that the kind of respect that goes both ways between them and back to the director is earned, So, like for example, the one that won the RTS award, the main story was there's a young actor in it called Ruben Reuter, who's Down syndrome. The weird thing is, after very little time of working with him, you forget that he's Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And you just see the person that they are, behind whatever disability they have. And some of the others were varying degrees, of either disability or learning difficulty or something.
It's a very diverse cast.
It is, yeah. But you just forget. You just completely forget, and you're just talking directly to the person now. So Ruben, the story was that he invented a fantasy father, this one particular episode, because he'd never known who his real dad was. And so this fantasy father was a brilliant footballer, and would take him on the pitch at Anfield or Wembley or whatever, and he would appear to Ruben's character and talk to him and give him advice, and then he'd disappear again. And the story of this episode was the father, he'd kind of gone on such a journey, the boy, that the father in the end said, "You don't need me anymore, son," and he disappeared and never returned.
Wow.
And Ruben was stunning. He was amazing,
To be able to tap into that. Gosh.
Yeah. He all actors have varying degrees of kind of memory, if you like, of lines and so on. And Ruben, because of the Down syndrome, his memory is not great for lines. So we'll often have, my first assistant was feeding him the line, then he would repeat it. We'd be shooting, he would do that line, then the offline would come, and then he would have to be prompted for the next one. But once the prompt had come, he would deliver it really well, and then all we did in the edit was put it all back together, and bingo, there was this fantastic performance. It was such a moving episode, and it got an award for it.
I've got a little shot of that later on I can come to.
Yeah.
When you have such a high frequency of turnover of shows or episodes, and you have to chop between directors, is there a dialogue between directors about continuity of the essence of what's happening? Not just... I imagine the writers take care of the through line of what's going on with each character and the storyline. But is there a separate dialogue that happens between directors to make sure that it has the same feel all the way through?
There is on continuing drama, like Casualty or Holby City or The Bill was, and the ones that just roll on. But obviously the one-off things, like I did a 5-part modern adaptation of Nicholas Nickleby a few years ago, and I did all of it, the whole lot. So I was in charge of the kind of through journey for all of it. But on a continuing drama, then you'll be picking up a storyline where another director has left off, And you chat to each other and take the baton on, really. Yeah.
I'm going to show you a clip now of Guy Henry in an interview, and he mentions your directing style.
Yeah.
I was told not. Edwards, wonderful director, and he will.
Nope.
I was told not to line read. And I was on the Holby City programme for years. For those who don't know, Holby City was a medical drama on primetime BBC. David and his Edwards, wonderful director, and he will just come up and go, "I just wondered if he doesn't like the tomato in that sandwich much, or whatever. I mean, he'll just, did he like his mother or not? I don't know. What do you think? Anyway, let's do another one, okay? And off you do, go another one with a little different flavour. Tomato, in fact. You're a new director now.
Is that a... Do you have... I'm going to show you a clip now of Guy Henry in an interview, and he mentions your directing style.
Yeah.
And I was on the Holby City programme for years. For those who don't know, Holby City was a medical drama on primetime BBC. David and his Edwards, wonderful director, and he will just come up and go, "I just wondered if he doesn't like the tomato in that sandwich much, or whatever. I mean, he'll just, did he like his mother or not? I don't know. What do you think? Anyway, let's do another one, okay?" And off you do, go another one with a little different flavour of tomato, in fact, to it. So.
Do you have your own techniques of, say, that actor is going to work well if I just drop an idea to them, but that actor might work better if I really describe exactly what I'm after? Do you consciously choose the way in which you direct each actor, or do you have your own?
Again, that comes from observing other directors when I was going through all those production jobs. And there are some directors who will describe every detail of what they're after. And as a first assistant, I'd stand there watching this note being delivered and the actor's eyes just glazing over,
I've got to remember all of that, yeah.
Yeah. And but I found that the best note givers were directors who came in with a very specific little note that just was like a key to the scene, and would unlock the secret of it. And it's, that's why Guy describes it as a tomato in a sandwich, is that perhaps the next take, he was thinking about, not only what he was saying for the lines he was supposed to give, but there was some other little nugget that he was thinking about. And suddenly that line comes out in such a natural way because it's not the kind of entire focus, which is often the way we are, isn't it? You're often thinking of two or three things at once as you're, as we're doing now, as we give this interview, there's all sorts of other stuff going on. So I quite often give just a note which is not necessarily relevant to the, to the piece, but it just gives it another direction. Gives it another pattern of thought for the actor, and quite often you'll get something fresh in the next take from it.
I really like that. There's a director whose name does escape me. I might insert it later here. Who I remember talking about inverting your intention, so you can go in as an actor with the idea as you need to deliver this line in a really angry manner, but what's the opposite if you invert anger and you have love behind it? So you're saying it angrily, but you're saying it angrily because you love that person so much, and all of a sudden it can, like you said, unlock a whole human element, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I had an example of that on Born and Bred, which was a kind of 50s period medical drama, Sunday night kind of light comedy and bit of drama. It was a lovely piece, lots of amazing characters in it. But the one of the leads in it was James Bolam, who I'd grown up watching as a kid, watching on the Likely Lads and things and various things through the years. But he had quite a reputation for being awkward and being difficult, which I've always taken with a pinch of salt anyway, because I've often found that people who are described as difficult are lovely, and They just need managing in the right way. So, but a quote I'd heard about James, the director I've mentioned, David Reynolds, that first director I've ever worked with. Well, James Boland described him as the least worst director he'd ever worked with.
There's a quote and a half, wasn't it? Oh, gosh.
So you can imagine going in to direct this man, you know.
Oh, where do you start?
Yeah. So I thought, I've got to crack this. It's got to be a kind of Waterloo moment here. So about a day into the shoot, we were doing a scene in a hospital ward, and it was James and Denise Welsh I'd cast as this woman from the village who'd got pregnant again, and it was very dangerous for her to become pregnant. So we rehearsed the scene, and James played it in a very sympathetic way, you know, that he was trying to be kind to her and to, you know, point out that she's putting herself in danger unnecessarily. And I thought, there's something wrong here. It's just not right. It doesn't feel right to me. So I went in and I said, look, James, I think you're being too sympathetic. I think you know this woman, you know her whole history, and yet she's still gone ahead and got pregnant. And I think you would be angry with her. I think you would be telling her off for what she's done in order to try and save her life. Oh, I don't know. He said, I'm really not sure about that. I thought,
oh, you might have hit a nerve there.
This is it. This is coming. But he said, okay, let's give it a go. So we rolled the cameras, and he did it, and he was quite hard on her, you know. And it was fantastic. And I was sat there in my monitor thinking, yes,
brilliant.
That's fantastic. And we cut, and I said, yes, lovely. We'll do there's some more setups to do, but I'm very happy with that. And then James came up behind the set where my monitor was. He didn't say anything, but he came up and he just gave me a nudge on the arm with his...
A knowing nudge. Yeah. I like that.
It meant the world to me, you know, because
you've cracked it.
Yeah, and from that moment on, we got on like an absolute house on fire. I mean, you know. So, those moments are special, and fortunately, I haven't had many where I've kind of given a note and an actor's reacted in a very negative way to it and refused to do it or anything. It's maybe once or twice in my whole career, you know. So, but yeah, another actor with a kind of fearful reputation was Jack Shepherd. You know, I did a couple of series of detective series called Wycliffe that he was the lead in, and he again, you know, because he's a director in theatre and he's a very, you know, bright, very intelligent man, but knows what he wants, you know, doesn't suffer fools. So I was in London doing my prep, and the producer came in and he said, we've got a real problem. One of your scripts, Jack absolutely hates it. He said, it's old-fashioned story. It was about finding buried treasure. It was a bit, you know, old-fashioned really, but he absolutely hates it, and has refused to shoot the episode as it stands.
Oh gosh!
Right, and he said, "I said, well, what does he? Has he said what he wants from it? You know,
has he given you an alternative?
Yeah." So he said, "Well, apparently he wants it to be more modern as a story." And an example he gave was, I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, they found 4 villains in a Range Rover that had all been shot in this Range Rover in Essex somewhere, and the police conclusion was they'd all shot each other. Obviously crazy, yeah. All exactly at the same time, you know. The likelihood of it.
1, 2, 3, go.
Yeah, but that was Jack's example of how he wanted to modernise the story.
Oh, okay.
Thought, right. So this producer said, right, you've got to go to Cornwall because he's shooting down there already. You've got to get on the train, go down to Cornwall, and meet him and find out what we're going to do, you know. So I'd also heard that Jack had this kind of theory about auras, the colour of people's auras.
Oh, I know what you're talking
Have
about.
you heard
Yeah,
this
I have.
before?
Yeah.
There I am dispatched. I never met him. Dispatched to Cornwall on the train to meet him, and I thought, well, I just hope my aura's the right colour,
Did he know you were coming?
Yeah.
Oh,
he knew I
okay.
was coming. I met him in a pub which was next to his digs.
It's a good start in a pub, I
It
suppose.
was, yeah. And we very simply and very quickly fixed the storyline. He was perfectly happy, and again, we got on like a house on fire from then on. So, when you hear of people being awkward and being difficult, I always feel, make your own mind up, because quite often, I'm sure it's true in music industry and all sorts, is that it's the people telling the tale that are the ones who have the problem rather than the...
Yeah, and they can blow it up to be a larger than life representation of who they are, when really they're just maybe a bit direct.
Or somebody in the television industry who built a very difficult reputation was Jimmy Nail, and I worked with him on Spender when I was still a first assistant, and we got on fine in that, we got on very well. But he's a difficult actor to deal with, and I had several chats with him about it, and he told me that he didn't ever feel he was a natural actor, and that the whole process of acting was actually quite painful to him.
Gosh.
Almost physically painful. And I thought, well, now I understand that. My approach to him is much more understanding of the process he's going through, and that he might lash out a bit, or he might be a bit angry about something, or one morning he turned up on a location ready to start shooting. The Grip had built what looked like the bridge over the River Kwai, a track on a slopey bit of road. He'd been up there since 5 a.m. building this thing.
Oh, wow.
Jimmy turned up, looked at the location and said, I'm not shooting here, got in his car and drove away again.
No, and they'd been there all morning.
Yeah, the whole crew's like, what do we do now, So I knew, it was awkward, but I found out that I got onto the BBC director's course while I was doing that job, and I told him, and he said, I tell you what, I'll write a piece for you, which was massively generous of him. Spender had been written by Ian Lafrene and Jimmy Nail combined, and he offered to write a piece for me, which he did. And he came down to our little house when we lived in Marlow, and we sat and chatted, and he brought his kids with him, and they played with Gareth and Kate, our children, And then a week or so later, he delivered this piece, and it was really good. It was a studio-bound piece, three-hander. And I shot it as part of the course, one of the projects of my course, and then that gives you a kind of calling card for searching for work when you're first starting out. And that got me my first job on EastEnders as a director.
Wow.
So I owe Jimmy
a lot,
an awful lot, yeah. And then of course I worked with him on Auf Wiedersehen, Pet, which was a legendary bit of television. I wasn't even in television when it first came out, but those two writers, Ian Lafrene and Dick Clement, who again I'd grown up watching their stuff back to The Likely Lads and Porridge and all those. They're absolute legends, those two. So to be working on scripts by them was just such a delight. And it was one morning out, we were shooting in the Caribbean, and Tim Spall had got a bit delayed by finishing a film in New Zealand, so we'd started all the scenes without him, and then he joined. So my first scene with the Magnificent Seven, as they were known, was them fishing off the Malacon, which was supposed to be in Cuba. So there they all were, and Dick and Ian turned up as well, just on a visit, sat behind me with a monitor and cans on, and I thought, I got legends here, there,
And they were over my shoulder. No pressure.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
This is amazing. And there's me sitting amongst it, calling the shots, It was fantastic. Fantastic.
When you were transitioning out of, I suppose, into directing, and you went freelance, was it a scary process of you know, were you sure there was work to be had ahead? You know, with the young family, that's a conversation that I know a lot of younger people my age that are in the freelance music end of things are, you know, always a bit daunted.
Yeah.
Was that a scary moment?
Yes. I can't really deny that it was any other way, because I'd had a staff job at the BBC, so even though the BBC pay isn't great, it was regular, and I was, and I just swallow dived out of it into a freelance career. So as I said, I was lucky enough to get those 6-month contracts at Brookside, which does help you, obviously. But during the process, I was sending stuff out to other shows to try and get another gig, and was getting nothing back at all. And I thought, oh my God,
what's going on?
The children were small. I had a mortgage,
Yeah.
And I thought, my ego has led me down this path, and oh my God,
what's going to happen?
What's going to happen? I used to deal with it by, I couldn't sleep, I used to get up and get on my bicycle and ride round all the little country lanes around.
To take your mind off.
Yeah, to try and just, take your mind off it and expel a bit of nervous energy and so on. But what it did do was it gave me a fantastic drive. I had to succeed at it. There wasn't any way back.
Yeah.
Not that I wanted to do, but actually practically there wasn't. The BBC was changing. They were getting rid of all the production staff and the camera crews and costume makeup. They were all going, So there wasn't any way back. I had to make a success of it. So it gave me that drive and the energy to really push, to do it, which is hard to drum up at other stages in your life, but that did at that time.
I've got some pictures for you.
Yeah.
And they are of different either projects you've worked on or shows you've worked on. If you could have a look at what the picture is, and then tell me how you were involved in it, or
of course. Yeah.
First one.
So, Holby City, yeah. So you'll notice in the director's box there's my name plus E. Lindley, which is Emma Lindley. I was a mentor, and I did several of these at Holby and at Casualty as well, where as an experienced director, I was put in charge of an inexperienced new director. As a block of those shows, you do 2 episodes. So I would shoot one, and then the new director would shoot the other one. So they'd have a chance to watch me, observe for, the first episode, and then they would take over and do theirs. And so that was what that was going on there, really. Emma's gone on. She's directing, in her own right and doing very well. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Second one.
That's up in Newcastle. Yeah, the Dumping Ground Award for Best Drama. Yeah, those kids are brilliant. Kia Pegg has left the show now because obviously it's a children's show, and you get to a certain age and you're
not in the house anymore. Yeah.
So she's now gone on to she's got a regular part in Doctors, so she's doing
Brilliant.
well. This was a few years ago now, and I went back and did one last year, and Jasmine is now like 16 and grown up into a woman from being a
tiny tot. Yeah.
So that's strange, but that was good. It was lovely to win that. Actually, it was a really nice award to win.
I've actually got the speech given.
Oh.
It's the Dumping Ground. The judges felt that the programme keeps pushing boundaries and challenging difficult storylines with sensitivity, compassion and humour. They were moved to tears. The drama goes to the BBC's Dumping Ground.
And also the second thing, I will thank the producers and the directors and analyzers. Yes, 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 I would say well done full of the cast, and we are all diverse cast, and we are a big happy family. Thank you.
Kia knows him inside out, obviously, you know, from working with him for all those years, and she would just feed him a little reminder and off he would go. It was lovely.
It's wonderful. And do you feel as well when you're working on something for a long time that you do have an extended family of actors and crew? And...
Very much so, yeah. It's fantastic. And I remember being bereft at the end of that first job. I'd done every episode of Give Us a Break, 10 episodes or something, and it had taken us the whole summer to shoot the series. And then everybody just went, well, bye then.
Off their own way?
Yeah, because they were used to it. And it was the first time I'd done it. And I thought, no, you've got to come back. You know,
yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it is. You get used to it after a while, but it's, it is hard. You get so close to people because there's such intense work, you know, there's long hours and emotional, intense work, not just with the actors, but with the crew as well. It does bring you close, you know, and it's one of the joys of the job, really, I think.
I suppose the art allows you to connect on a more human or a deeper level quicker than you would if you were just meeting a random friend or making a new friend.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I'm trying to do with the podcast is cut to the deeper levels and chat about process and all of that. But it must be hard to walk away sometimes at the end of a...
Yeah, it is. It's you just have to be hard-nosed about it, you know, because it happens again and again. And then you hope that you'll work with people again in the future, which you do if you get the chance to. But sometimes you never see them again, you know. It's a very bizarre process sometimes. But
next up.
So 5 minutes, yeah. So that was Chizzy wrote this short and asked me if I'd direct it, and I said yes, I would. If and Chizzy agreed, and she wrote it actually with Kate in mind, my daughter, who I believe is doing one of these.
She'll be here in a few hours, yeah.
Because she was trying to get established as an actor and she needed some showreel stuff. So I said, you know, if she plays the paramedic, Chizzy played a woman who was in a car crash and stuck in a car, and really the paramedic had to tell her she only had 5 minutes to live. And, you know, the whole premise of it is, what would you do if you were told, you know, you only had 5 minutes? And we shot it all in one day. It was really hard going, but with a pal of mine as the DOP, shooting it all on his Canon 5D. It was all very low budget. And,
wow.
You know, but we did get a car with a roof cut off and nice location to shoot it in. And it's a good little film. It won an accreditation in the Buff Film Awards film festival. So Chizzy was happy with it, and it was a good experience for Kate.
So the next two are tweets, and these are people that you've been working with, and this looks like Casualty.
Yes, I remember that one very clearly, because the story was about a woman who was an amputee and had fallen off her horse and was left kind of stuck in a field. And George Rainsford's character was out running and found her in the middle of a field.
Oh, wow.
Lucky. Yeah. So that was the story. But I cast this young actress, Steph Dimmock, who was born with a fault to her right leg, which meant it had to be amputated.
Oh, wow.
And when I met her in the audition, I thought she knew the story. It was the life, you know, her life, really. Mm. And I thought, if I can get a lovely performance out of her, I'm going to get something so honest and true from it. So I cast her, and she was fantastic.
It's true lived experience, isn't it? Mm.
Yeah. And she was a little bit wooden to start with, but with notes and bit of time and patience, which you often don't have on a show like Casualty. But I thought I'll sacrifice something else in just to help her. And George was brilliant with her as well. And she turned in a really moving performance. And I've kept up with her news. She's had a baby since, and it's quite an inspiration for people, who are amputees. So
Fantastic.
that's the story behind that one.
Another tweet.
Yeah, Jimmy Akingbola. Well, I mean, he's in Bel Air now. It was called The Fresh Prince.
And this is the reboot of it. I'm with you. I've not seen it, but
he's
yeah.
one of the regulars in that. I worked with him when he was one of the regulars in Holby. He's a fantastic actor and a brilliant guy. But I had to do his first scene where he turns up absolutely beside himself with anger. And I shot his arrival into the building without seeing his face at all. Just his feet, following his feet, and his finger stabbing at the lift button.
Brilliant. And then eventually...
followed him out and then eventually reveal him. And it worked a treat. And I think that's what that was referring to.
2011.
First two episodes, yeah. So, he's a brilliant character. And a lot of people don't realise, because he's such a good character actor, like he was in Rev as well. He played a junkie in Rev.
Oh, wow.
And he was... I watched... I don't know if you remember 2012, so it's quite a long time ago now, but it was like the committee that was supposed to be setting up the Olympics.
Oh no, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. It was a comedy.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
BBC Three.
I think so. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
But Jimmy played the doorman in it, who would never let anybody in. Right?
Great character.
I saw about 4 episodes before I realised it was Jimmy, even though I knew him really well.
No way.
He was such strong a character and so different from what he usually is. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I love Jimmy to bits. It's brilliant.
Final one.
Yeah. So this is Kate, her latest short film, The Traveller. Or I think it's just called Traveller, actually. I should get that right. I'm just amazed, really, that she wrote it, she crowdfunded it, and she's acting in it, the main part in it, and she edited it herself as well. I recommended the DOP, this guy, Peter Butler, I've worked with lots over the years, and is a genius, a quiet Irish genius. He's a fantastic man. Because I thought they would get on, and they absolutely did. They absolutely hit it off. And she went against all advice of don't work with animals, children and animals, and got this horse. But he turned out to be the best actor of any of them.
Stunning job. Absolutely stunning horse.
Fantastic. Tuco, the spotty horse. Yeah, and it's a lovely short, and I'm really proud of Kate for that, really, and I hope that it's a good calling card for her. If we can get her directing as well, I'd love that. I mean, I think her writing is that's the key difference between me and her. I've never written. I've always just directed other people's scripts, whereas Kate has got a very strong writing style, and has developed a very strong directing style as well. So my long-term aim is, or a goal really, is to see her succeed as directing her own script, which would be amazing.
How does it feel having had a career over the last 4 decades in this industry, and you're now seeing your daughter follow in some footsteps and find her own way? How does that feel as a dad?
Well, I'm stupidly proud of her, really, because she is very talented, much more talented than I ever was. So she deserves to make it, and she will. I know she will. I've had some lucky breaks, as we've been talking about, and she just needs a lucky break from somebody to say, I can see something in this girl, let's give her a chance. And it'll come because, she deserves it, really, in the long run, I think. So, yeah, I'm immensely proud, and I don't know how much longer I'll keep going for. I mean, I could retire in 3 or 4 years, Whether I will or not is another thing. But if I can help Kate during my last years as a of working as a director, then I'll do everything I can really to get her going.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
As we head towards the end of the podcast, if there was one bit of advice that you would throw in the direction of a new director or a young director, what would it be?
I was told by an experienced director that you've got to have something you want to say. And I thought about it for years and years afterwards, and I remember at the time thinking, have I got anything to say?
Mm-hmm.
Have I got a burning issue that I want to say? And I realised after a few years of directing that I didn't really have any one specific thing I needed to tell the world, and that my career has been built up of interpreting other people's ideas or, my own ideas, but via, a good performance or something from a script. And I didn't actually, that's my job as a director is to be an interpreter. Not to, I'm not writing the script, I'm not bringing my own, trying to kind of subvert a story into something that it isn't, just to try and, get some message across I think my main advice would be, are you a storyteller? That's the key to it. You've got to have a history of telling tall tales, or it's all the things I did as a kid. I realised what turned me into a director in my adulthood is loving listening to stories, telling stories. That's the key thing. So for me, it's the perfect mixture of creativity, because I'm not an artist. I can't draw and paint or anything like that. But there is a creativity in interpreting a script and getting a fantastic performance out of actors. But married with a great practical skill as well. So you need to know your cameras, you need to know your lenses, you need to know how stuff can move. I think the key thing I've felt over the years as a bit of advice is, where do you want to tell the story from? Going back to when I was saying about Edge of Darkness, that was the first time I'd seen a camera used with a long lens back way from the actors. And the actors were just together and talking to each other without any apparent interference. See what I mean? Even though obviously it is all rehearsed, it's all set up and so on, but it looks like the scene was going to happen anyway, and the camera just happened to be there and capture it. So it's a very observational kind of style. And that was what I concentrated on in my early years of it. And I've used again over the years, gone back to that as a style. Or do you want to tell the story as if you were a character stood within a scene and turning and observing and so on, and that puts your camera within the scene. See what I mean? And it makes a huge difference to the intimacy of how a scene plays. I mean, if you look at films, say like the Coen brothers, they are often they're technically the camera's right there in the face of the actors. But of course, on screen, they'll be playing a scene to a little cross or a dot on the matte box, because that's where the eye line looks like they're looking at the other actor. But the other actor is probably, way behind the camera. You've got a camera, you've got the crew, you've got all that in between you and the other actor. So it takes another type of skill as an actor to be able to be natural, act into a little dot stuck on the matte box on the front of the camera.
And it takes a great deal of skill for it as a director to be able to make sure that's all happening and keep the continuity throughout it all, and then be able to communicate it to the audience as well.
Yeah.
As I've been doing my homework on you, one thing that popped up, and I didn't know what it was something called Ned and the Windbangers. What's this, David?
That it's yet to be complete, so I'm hoping that nobody steals it as an idea in the meantime. But
I'll beep it out until it's until it's released.
it was initially as an idea for a children's novel, which I started to write, and I've structured it all out, so I know where it should go, and I've written a couple of chapters, but then work and life has prevented me from completing it, but I will do one day. And it's Kate. Kate, when she was about 7, came to me and said, "Dad, I've got a friend." Which you'd think, imaginary
Where's
friends.
this going?
Yeah. It's all of, but then she said, "No, he's called Ned, and he's a wind, and he comes to my bedroom window and he takes me on adventures."
Wow. And then you locked all of the doors, and
She's always had this amazingly vivid imagination, and so I wasn't worried at all that she had this, imaginary friend, because it was all lovely stories.
That's beautiful.
So I thought I'll try and get it down as a children's story. So Ned and the Windbaggers is the first story, and the Windbaggers are a pirate ship. It's set in mid 1600s. Because Ned magically can not only transport you through space but time as well. So he takes young Kate, the little girl who's at the centre of the story, back to this pirate ship, because they've worked out a way of capturing the world's winds into a huge bag on the back of the ship. There's like a sideways on hot air balloon, if you like. And they can just let enough wind out of the bag to go wherever they want.
What a useful guy to know. That's amazing. What a creative thought.
So he takes her, Ned takes her to try and help rescue all his friends, the winds, from this giant bag.
I love that. Yeah. I can't wait to read that.
So there we are. That's it's yet to come. But as I say, I hope nobody steals it. But there's all sorts of other stories that I thought I could explore after that. One I thought of was that Ned was responsible for telling all the stories to Scheherazade, so that she could do the Arabian Nights stories, and save her own life. She didn't know the stories, but Ned was telling them
along the way.
Yeah.
Oh, genius.
Yeah. So there's all sorts. And I wanted the young girl at the centre of it I wanted her to be a bridge between the natural world and the human world. A bit of a kind of Greta Thunberg idea, really, that because she could talk to the winds via Ned, she had a direct line to the natural world, and could express what was going on in terms of global pollution and global warming. So that was the long-term aim of it, really, and that still applies. I don't think I've kind of missed the boat, really, in terms of that as a story. So
incredible. Yeah. David, thank you so much for your time today.
Not at all.
It's been mind-blowing hearing all sorts of stories.
Good.
And I can't wait as well to read Ned and the Windbangers and see your work on TV into the future.
Fine. Oh, well, yeah. There's one tonight, actually. I forgot to mention. I said I can't draw.
Yes.
Well, what I do is I use a program called FrameForge, which is a little 3D. I can send you this file so that you can use it in the edit if you want. But so you've got all the characters and the vehicles and cameras that you can place wherever you need them, and you can build up the scene. So this is a motorcycle accident that actually goes out on tonight's Casualty. It hasn't been shown on TV yet. It's going out this evening. So it's a young lad riding his bike. He gets it has a burn on his hand that he's bothered by as he's riding, and he goes flying down this industrial estate, and then a huge tipper comes around the corner, and he has to throw the bike over to avoid going underneath the front of it.
Wow.
And he skids across the ground and ends up in a big pile of wiring.
So this is allowing you to not only visualize and then put it out, but you're able to get the right camera angle and then send this ahead to the team.
The whole point being, a picture tells 1,000 words, really. I can give that to the crew and say, right, these are the shots that I need to do this sequence. And we can then all stand around the storyboard and discuss the best way technically of achieving it.
So you can get the logistics out of the way early and then focus on the shots. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, that's what I use. And I've done that. There's not time to storyboard a whole episode or something, but for the stunts particularly, where they can be very time consuming if you haven't got a proper plan, so that's why I do them for that, really. And it gives you a good idea of the technical costs it's going to go into as well, and whether the show can afford the budget for the things that you need. Because you need tracking vehicles, you need camera mounts for the bike, you need, and particularly all the vehicles. I mean, that dumper truck was on the location that we found, and we said, can we use it? And they said, yeah, sure. It was massive.
Oh, perfect.
Big,
That was lucky.
So, yeah, it was. So I just said, right, we'll have that. And we used it, and I put it in. So, yeah.
That's incredible. And if you're listening to this rather than watching this at home, this is a cue to go and watch it on YouTube so you can actually see what this looks like.
Yeah. I can send you that if you want
brilliant.
as a PDF, and you could put it.
I'll put it on the screen.
On the screen.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
One closing tradition we do on the podcast
Yeah.
is that a previous guest forwards a question to whoever the next guest is going to be.
All right.
And this is from Scott Edwards, who's a YouTuber and a filmmaker himself. But he didn't know who this was going to. He said, what would you want it to say if someone were to write a book about you?
Wow. I think the core of it would be, I feel that I've achieved much more than my ambition was initially. Like I said to you, I wanted to be a theatre stage manager, and I ended up as a film and TV director. I didn't know anybody in the industry. I didn't get a leg up from anybody, or it's just to say you can do it. From the outside, these industries can appear a bit, unapproachable and difficult to break into. But if you persevere and you're willing to make tea and brush the floor, you can do it. And every director I've ever heard interviewed has said that they just nagged and they broke in and like Spielberg did it, didn't he? He took out an office in the studio and sat in it until somebody said, "Oh, we need you for this," and he was off. You've just got to be dogged and kind of determined, and you'll make it. You can achieve it. Don't be overawed by it. Just go after what you want, and you will achieve it. I think that. I'll tell you something else I just thought of as well. I used to define myself as a director. I realise in my head that's what I was. And then more recently I've realised that just a bloke who goes out and walks his dog and occasionally goes and does bits of television or filming. And it's important. It's a small statement, but it's a very important difference. That I'm not, it's what you define yourself as. And I think it's dangerous to define yourself as what your career is. Not be just yourself.
Very wise words to end the podcast.
I hope so.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. If you're still listening at home, thank you so much. Please do share, like, subscribe, and also get in touch, because the more I hear from you at home, the more I'll be able to cater these interviews to be exactly what you want to hear and who you want to hear it from. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, remember to create with people, connect with people, and be exactly you. Peace. Thank you so much.